Too short a season, the Enterprise transports an elderly Starfleet admiral to negotiate a hostage crisis. This one is not good. So it starts off, the governor of this planet says terrorists have taken government officials hostage, and they demand a Federation negotiator. And the governor, who's named Karnas, which is a good name, says only one man can do it.
Commander Mark Jameson.
And he gives him 6 days or the hostages die. Karnas is played by Michael Pataki. I don't know if that's how you say his name. He's the voice of that weird Sewer King villain from the Batman animated series.
You evil bat. Yes, you have. You've hurt my pretty pets. And you've frightened my beloved children.
Karnas is a very forceful guy, and you already can tell something is off because in all his communications, he has a bunch of guns behind him on the wall, which already implies that something's up. So they find Mark Jameson, who's an admiral, and he's really old. This is one of the worst old people makeups I've ever seen.
It's definitely not great. I do think the much bigger problem with it is the performance.
You know who he looks like? He looks like Statler, the two guys in the balcony. He's always moving around like an idiot.
And he's always making that dumb expression with his lips.
And he never looks at the person he's talking to. Jim Henson didn't need a Muppet because he already had Statler. So the reason Karnas demands Jameson is because he negotiated 45 years ago with another group of terrorists. Jameson is suffering from Iverson's disease, which is an incurable disease which slowly deteriorates your body, and he's going to die. So he's in a Professor X hover chair. So Beverly says she has to do a routine medical checkup, and Jameson does his cartoonish look around. So when he gives her records, she says they're 2 months old.
It's weird because he claimed that they were from 2 days ago.
The whole episode, Beverly is constantly saying something is going on with Jameson. Something is wrong. He's lying about something. He's trying to hide something, and no one listens to her because she's related to Wesley, and no one listens to him. Picard even makes a joke. He just plays her off and says, "You don't know what you're talking about."
In Admiral Jameson's quarters, there's a shot of his wife pulling some clothes out of a drawer, and then she pushes a button to have the drawer close by itself, which seems like a completely pointless piece of technology. I can't imagine why you would have that, even if it was something that existed.
I'd like to count how many times his wife exclaims his name out of surprise.
Mark! 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 Mark!
So Iverson's disease is incurable. There's nothing you can do. There's no treatment or anything. But Jameson slowly gets better. He gets up out of his chair. He walks around. He gets all frisky with his wife. When he does it initially, and he's walking around on the bridge very slowly, the music is a bassoon, which is akin to Peter and the Wolf when the grandfather walks around. That made me laugh. He has all these episodes where it looks like he's having a heart attack, and his wife always freaks out, and he says,
Just give me a moment. See, I'm better. It's going away.
And it turns out that he's been taking a drug that allows him to de-age. You're supposed to administer it over 2 years, but with these negotiations coming up, he took 2 doses immediately. If I had strep throat and they gave me a bottle of pills, I wouldn't down them all at the same time. It turns out there are no terrorists on this planet. Karnas has the hostages, which I never would have figured out because he has a bunch of guns behind his desk, and he yells at everybody and makes all these demands. He's forcing Jameson to come back to negotiate for their lives. Instead, he decides to go down with an armed rescue mission. So the rescue mission fails. They eventually run into an armed team, and that one guy does a really funny leap out of the way. So they beam out. It's a total waste of time.
That's the first time that we really see a phaser battle in Star Trek, and right away you can see how impractical their phasers are because of how hard it is to aim when you're just holding something in your hand in front of you that doesn't have any kind of line you can line things up with.
But the armed team on the other side has phasers also. They look like more traditional weapons. So it turns out Jameson's been lying the whole time, not just about his drug use, but about the reason they're there. 45 years ago, Karnas took hostages. Jameson went in and gave Karnas a bunch of weapons instead of negotiating. But he gave a bunch of weapons to the other side, too, in equal amounts. He said it was his interpretation of the Prime Directive. It plunged them into civil war for 40 years. And then Jameson falsified the records of what he did. So he's broken pretty much every law.
Every little thing that he says and every action that you find out he's taken in the past just makes him more and more of an asshole every time you find out a little thing about him. Such an asshole and such an idiot.
He's such a Kaczynski. He decides to do one last act of atonement and give himself up to Karnas for all the things he did, but he's going to die anyway because Beverly says his vitals are not stabilizing and his organs are becoming younger and younger, and they're basically going to implode. Karnas doesn't believe it's Jameson, obviously, so Picard puts a tricorder on the table, and it shows Jameson's de-aging. That would not be entirely convincing to me, especially in the 24th century.
And on a screen that's 2 inches square.
I could find pictures of myself from when I was younger and just play them in reverse. After Jameson dies, Karnas says, "I'll release the hostages." The crew goes back up to the Enterprise and they act like everything's finished. But the planet still sucks. It's still ruled by a maniac. He doesn't say, "We'll make peace on this planet." He's still in charge. He's still ruling as a dictator.
I think that's because they're trying to follow the Prime Directive and not interfere with the planet any more than they have to.
Starfleet has interfered quite a bit because they caused a 40-year civil war. It's not like they introduced chunky peanut butter ahead of the time when they would have invented it. No one else really has anything to do in this episode. The only people who have anything to do is Picard just on the side, and then Beverly a little bit until they fully dismiss her.
And that's the entire episode.
Overall, I don't like this episode. I don't like Jameson. I don't like the plot. I don't like anything about it.
Agreed.
I think it's a boring episode, too. There's nothing I can think of that I say, at least I like that. Except that one leap that would raise it from an F to a D-. I'd give it a D-.
It's too uninteresting of a plot that goes on for too long with characters that are so grating anytime that they're on the screen, where the Enterprise characters barely have anything to do.